Hello and welcome to another fantastic show, My Orgasmic. Oh, wow, we got some verbal diarrhea going on this morning. Let's try this again, shall we? Good morning. It's your host, Gaia Morrissette, and welcome to another fantastic episode of My Orgasmic Life. Yay! There we go. All right, so today on the show, I'm going to share I don't think I've ever shared this publicly, so I'm going to get it live. Everybody who's with me live right now is going to get it live, and, it's going to go out into the ethers. All right, so I want to talk about, so there's content warning first before we get into today's show, so everybody's prepared. So I'm going to talk about masturbation. I'm going to talk about vacuum cleaners. I'm going to talk about menstruation, and I'm going to talk about God and Catholicism. Okay? So this is what our story, this is the content warning. And I'm going to go into some shame. All right, here we go. So once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a young Gaia at the age of 11. So part of my contributing to my household was chores. And so I was on vacuuming duty one day. And so, I'm vacuuming, I'm doing my chores. And all of a sudden, I kind of the vacuum sucks my leg. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that would feel like. Now, I've been exploring touching myself and masturbation and pleasure, from a very early on age, like as young as 2 are some of my earliest memories of, self-exploration and pleasure and touching my genitals. So I was like, ooh, let's masturbate with the vacuum cleaner before, we were supposed to go to church. It was like early Sunday morning. So I locked myself in the bathroom where I was supposed to be cleaning, laid down. I took the vacuum cleaner hose and I put it to, my clit, and I had earth-shattering orgasms, and then I continued vacuuming. So we get to church, and we're sitting in church. At that point, I was Catholic. So we're in the Catholic church, and we're at Mass, and all of a sudden, I feel something wet between my legs, and I don't realize what it is. And what happens is I get my period. And while I have my period, while this is happening in church. And so in that moment, there's some emotions that are going to come up here. In that moment, the first thought was, and I'd already known about, periods because they, taught me. Thanks, Katie. So what was I saying? Okay, so I'd known about menstruation. I knew about periods. We had the health nurse come into the school. My mom gave me the whole spiel about that's what happens to women. I already knew all about it. But in that moment of me getting my period in church after masturbating with the vacuum, I was like, my first thought was, God is punishing me for masturbation. God is punishing me for masturbating with a vacuum cleaner. And what that did in that moment is it didn't, for some people, it might have, with a lot of clients that come to see me about masturbation shame, the shame might have anchored into the masturbation piece. But for me, the shame anchored into my period, menstruation. It was a punishment for pleasure. So here, you got pleasure, here's your punishment. And and between that and the teachings of the church, which was, Eve, took the apple. So this is why we go through all of this suffering. And this is what was kind of taught to me around our periods. And so for me, it like really anchored into that piece around, the reason why you have your period, the reason why you're menstruating right now is because of punishment. And so I wanted to share that because that was kind of what was coming up for me this morning when I was doing some meditation. It was like, getting ready because my body is getting ready to bleed. It's not, next couple of days, my, menstruation, my period, my moon cycle, my moon time, my sacred flow is going to be showing up. And I was, and every month I try to heal and let go of whatever might be still lingering. Now, fast forward throughout my life, I've had nothing but excruciating periods. And it's they're emotional, I can't even function, the cramping, all of these things. And this is why I do this whole kind of, purging process and, understanding the magic of, menstruation and all the beautiful gifts of, blood magic and all of this stuff to claim that, right? Because the truth is, in that moment when I had my very first period, instead of it being a blessing from divine, a blessing from God, a blessing for being in my body and this great body that I have, that every month I get to purge all the toxins, all the things that don't serve me. It's a beautiful gift. It's a beautiful gift. And it's incredibly sacred. And because I didn't have that the very first time, it anchored into my body as punishment. And so every month, up to recently, because I've done a lot of healing around this, but every month it would be a reinforcement of, it would be so horrendous that it was like, yes, this was punishment. So I share this story with you because, one, I think it's an important story to share. Again, if I had been somebody else, as so many of my clients that come see me, that experience may have anchored into masturbation shame, in the fact that masturbation is bad and dirt and wrong, and God is punishing you for masturbating. But I didn't. I loved masturbating, and I happened to be lucky that I grew up in a household where it was comfortable to talk about, and it was an important part of self-exploration, was the key to being able to have good sex life with other people. So that, our household, it was very much encouraged to explore your body, to know what you want, just do that into the privacy of your own space. But if I grown up in another household, it might have been a double whammy. And so whatever those first experiences, anchor into us our beliefs and ideologies, and anchor it in our body, anchor it in our mind, anchor it into our soul, anchor it into our spirit, anchor it into our behavior. So when we have a first of anything, it can be anchored in this like glorious, wonderful way, or it can be anchored in this traumatic way. And when it gets anchored in a traumatic way, whether we're talking about our first kiss, our first menstruation, our first intercourse experience, our first oral sex experience, it doesn't matter what it is. Our first talking in public, our first anything that we do something for the very first time. It's like our brain has this clean slate, and our being has a clean slate. And so however that first goes, it's kind of like creating the imprinting or the blueprint of how you're going to move with that for the rest of your life, unless you decide to do some rewiring, which is possible, like I did, right? And I continue to do. Now when I have my period, I'm like, oh, thank you. Oh, this is beautiful. I can't, you know, and I go through a whole process of like embracing and honoring my flow. You know, I take the, you know, I want to share about this journey around being in the flow with my flow. And this was actually this ancient wisdom that, you know, that's been passed down generationally. This knowledge, I heard it, I guess I reheard it about 4 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I happened to be on this summit, being a part of this summit, and one of the speakers, her name was Alexandria Pope, and she started Red School. And she talked about this, our cycle, and our energetic cycle with our cycle, not just our when we bleed, but the whole cycle that it is that we go through before we're in menopause. All right. So the cycle of, you know, the first 2 days, depending on what your cycle is, but for me, the first 2 days of my cycle is complete purging. And I give myself space to purge whatever. I can be crying, I could be laughing, I can just, you know, allow myself to release. I give myself permission to release all of my emotions that I might have been storing up for the month. I release all of the, waste that might be in my body. I release it, I purge it as it flows out of me. And then I go into connecting into my my uterus, my womb, my whole reproduction organ system. And I go in through there to connect to the universe, to divine. And usually I get a download of like, why am I here? What is my soul's purpose? And it's always something really extravagantly, you know, outrageously big, because that's apparently why I'm here. And then I go in the next day, I'll go in and I'll connect with, okay, well, how do I stay in line with that? And it, you know, it'll give me a very detailed, these are the areas, these are the things, you know, work-wise, health-wise, emotionally, relationship-wise. It'll give me a pretty detailed, basically blueprint for the month of what I need to do and how I need to stay in line to be in line with my soul's purpose. And then as I come out of my bleed until I ovulate, that's when I have the highest level of energy in which I can be out in the world and connect with the world and be like all my big, fabulous self. And then when I'm done ovulating, I come back into myself for self-awareness, self-discovery, which is the stage I'm in right now. And I come back into myself, into this place of self-discovery, self-awareness, understanding, knowledge seeking, whether it's professionally or personally, before I go into my bleed. And so since I've been living from that place, which helped, by the way, release all of that shame and all of that stuff and, you know, all the shit that I was caring about that time, very first time about menstruation, you know, that happened when I was 11. And it's basically took me till I was 40 to heal that, to reclaim that, to honor who I am. So if you want some support, thank you, by the way, thank you everybody who's live with me today. Thank you for holding space, for listening to my story, for the hearts and the thumbs up and the claps and the support. It's been beautiful. Thank you. And everybody who is listening, you know, all the audience that's going to be listening or watching, you know, I thank you for taking the time again to hang out with me and to spend some time with me and to, you know, hear what I have to share. So the moral of the story is whatever your firsts are, you need to honor them, acknowledge them, see if there's stuff that didn't support you and is it playing out in your life. If it is, it's time to rewire that, because you don't need to live from that place. You don't need to live from that place of trauma. All right. So you want to spend some more time with me, you can, for that kind of support and help you rewire your noggin and your being and your, and your behavior. You can find me at succulentliving.com. For all of your BDSM and BDSM wellness and educational needs, you can find me at empressgaia.com. Follow me on all the social media platforms under Gaia Morrissette and Empress Gaia. And don't forget to listen, download, hang out with me on my podcast, My Orgasmic Life. And I have an app. So if you're like, oh, I want to have you with me all the time, Gaia, which who doesn't want to have that, right? You can go to Google Play Store, just download the app, My Orgasmic Life app. All right, that's it. That's all. Oh, actually, no. Today's episode was brought to you and sponsored by Tickle.life. Hee hee. Sometimes I forget about the sponsors. All right, until our next show. Happy bleeding. Happy whacking off. Have a juicy day. Mwah. Bye-bye.